The desert night was quiet, save for the occasional whisper of wind brushing over the sand dunes. Stars glittered above, a canopy of countless points of light, as if the heavens themselves were curious spectators. Amal stood at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza, her flashlight casting an unsteady beam over the weathered limestone blocks. Beside her, Professor Rahim, her mentor and an authority on Egyptology, adjusted his glasses, his face illuminated by the faint glow of a tablet. "This is where the anomaly was detected," Rahim murmured, pointing to a specific corner of the pyramid. The coordinates matched the strange readings they'd picked up from a satellite scan earlier that month, readings that defied every law of physics Amal had learned. "It doesn't make sense," Amal said, brushing her fingers against the cool stone. "The readings suggest a massive energy flux, but there's no source here. It's just stone. Stone that has stood for thousands of years," Rahim replied. "Maybe it's not about what's here, but where it's connected to." Amal frowned, her scientific mind wrestling with the implications. Connected to where? Rahim didn't answer. Instead, he took out a small device, a handheld scanner designed to detect electromagnetic anomalies, and switched it on. A faint hum filled the air as the device began to pulse with a soft, green light. "It's happening again," he said, his voice tight with anticipation. "Stand back." Amal stepped away as the ground beneath her began to vibrate. A low, resonant hum emanated from the pyramid, growing louder with each passing second. The air around them shimmered like heat waves on a summer road, distorting the stars and the pyramid itself. Amal's breath caught in her throat as the massive structure seemed to ripple, its edges blurring and shifting like water disturbed by a pebble. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Rahim's eyes were wide, his face pale. "I think the pyramid is phasing." "Phasing?" Amal echoed, her pulse racing. "What does that even mean?" Before Rahim could respond, the shimmering intensified. The pyramid's surface glowed faintly, its once solid appearance replaced by an almost translucent quality. Through the glowing stone, Amal thought she saw something, shapes and shadows that didn't belong to their world. "Parallel dimensions," Rahim whispered, his voice almost reverent. "The pyramid isn't just a tomb. It's a gateway." Amal stared, her mind reeling. She had heard the theories before, the pyramids as energy conduits, as markers for extraterrestrial visitors, but this was something else entirely. This was real. The hum reached a crescendo, and a blinding flash of light enveloped the area. Amal shielded her eyes, her heart pounding as a strange sensation washed over her, a feeling of weightlessness, as if she were suspended in a void. When the light finally subsided, she opened her eyes, expecting to see the familiar desert landscape. Instead, she found herself in a place that defied all logic. The pyramid still stood before her, but it was different. Its surface was sleek and metallic, reflecting a sky that shimmered with hues of violet and gold. Strange structures loomed in the distance, tall, spindly towers that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The air was heavy with a faint hum, a constant vibration that resonated in her bones. "Where are we?" Amal whispered, turning to Rahim. The professor was staring at the scene with equal parts awe and terror. "Another dimension," he said. "A parallel universe." Amal's mind raced as she tried to process what had happened. The pyramid had shifted, transporting them to a place that was both familiar and alien. The implications were staggering. If the pyramids were indeed gateways to other dimensions, what did that mean for their history? Their purpose? Their builders? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound, a soft, rhythmic clicking that seemed to come from all around them. She turned, her flashlight beam cutting through the strange, shimmering air, and froze. Creatures were emerging from the shadows, their forms vaguely humanoid but elongated and angular. Their skin was a silvery gray, reflecting the light in iridescent patterns, and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity. They moved with a fluid grace, their limbs bending in ways that seemed impossible. "Rahim," Amal whispered, her voice trembling. "What are they?" The professor didn't answer. He was too busy staring at the creatures, his expression one of pure fascination. "Inhabitants of this dimension," he said finally, or perhaps guardians of the gateway. The creatures approached, their movements deliberate but not overtly hostile. One of them stepped forward, its glowing eyes locking onto Amal. It raised a hand long and delicate, with fingers that seemed to shift and blur at the edges, and pointed at her. "What does it want?" Amal asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rahim shook his head. "I don't know, but I think we should find out." Before Amal could protest, the creature touched its chest, then gestured toward the pyramid. The gesture was clear. It wanted them to follow. "Are you insane?" Amal hissed. "We don't know what they'll do to us." Rahim's gaze was steady. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime, Amal. We may never get another chance to understand this. We have to follow." Reluctantly, Amal nodded. They followed the creatures into the shimmering pyramid, stepping through an entrance that hadn't been there before. Inside, the walls glowed with a soft, pulsating light, and the air was thick with energy. Symbols covered the surface's intricate, flowing designs that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. "It's alive," Rahim murmured, running his fingers over the symbols. "The pyramid itself is alive." Amal's stomach churned as she took in their surroundings. The interior of the pyramid was vast, much larger than it should have been. Corridors stretched in every direction, their ends disappearing into an otherworldly haze. The creatures led them down one of the corridors, their movements graceful and silent. At the end of the corridor, they entered a chamber unlike anything Amal had ever seen. The walls were lined with crystalline structures that pulsed with light, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal. On the pedestal rested a sphere, its surface swirling with colors that seemed to shift and dance. The creature stopped, gesturing toward the sphere. Amal hesitated, but Rahim stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Wait," Amal called, fear gripping her. "We don't know what it is." Rahim turned to her, his expression determined. "This is why we're here, Amal. To understand." He touched the sphere, and the room erupted with light. Images flooded Amal's mind, visions of worlds beyond her imagination, of civilizations rising and falling, of pyramids scattered across countless dimensions, each serving as a gateway. She saw the builders of the pyramids beings of immense power and knowledge, their forms shifting and fluid like the creatures before her. And then she saw the truth. The pyramids were not just portals. They were anchors holding the fabric of the multiverse together. Each shift between dimensions came at a cost, a delicate balance that, if disrupted, could unravel everything. As the visions faded, Amal found herself on her knees, her breath ragged. Rahim stood beside her, his face pale and his eyes wide. "They built the pyramids to maintain balance," he said, his voice barely audible. "But someone or something has been using them for their own purpose." Amal's heart sank as she realized the implications. If the balance was disrupted, it could mean the end of not just their world, but every world connected by the pyramids. The creatures watched them silently, their glowing eyes unblinking. Amal got to her feet, her resolve hardening. "We have to stop whoever is doing this," she said. "We have to protect the balance." Rahim nodded, his fear replaced by determination. "But first, we need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Amal couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not by the creatures, but by something far more sinister. The shifting pyramid had revealed its secrets, but it had also opened a door to unimaginable dangers, and Amal knew that their journey was only beginning. The silence in the glowing chamber was oppressive, the weight of their discovery pressing heavily on Amal's shoulders. The crystalline walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, as if the pyramid itself was alive and aware of their presence. Amal glanced at Rahim, who was staring at the sphere with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "We can't stay here," Amal said, her voice cutting through the thick air. "We need to get back and figure out who's using the pyramids and how." Rahim tore his gaze from the sphere and nodded reluctantly. "You're right, but leaving might not be as simple as entering." The creatures, still silent and unreadable, gestured toward another corridor. Their actions seemed purposeful, deliberate. Amal hesitated, but Rahim stepped forward without hesitation. They want us to follow again, Rahim said, glancing back at her. This could lead us to answers. Or a trap, Amal muttered, but she followed anyway, her curiosity and sense of duty outweighing her fear. The corridor twisted and turned in impossible ways, defying geometry and logic. At one point, Amal felt as though she were walking upside down, though gravity still held her firmly to the ground. The crystalline walls shifted colors, their glow dimming and brightening as if reacting to their movements. She couldn't help but feel they were being studied, observed by the very structure of the pyramid. Finally, they emerged into another chamber, this one even more alien than the last. The walls were covered in symbols that glowed faintly, their patterns pulsating like a heartbeat. In the center of the room was a towering obelisk made of a material Amal couldn't identify. Its surface shimmered like liquid mercury, reflecting distorted images of the room and its occupants. Rahim approached the obelisk cautiously. "This is it," he said, awe in his voice. "The control nexus." Amal frowned. "Control for what?" "For the entire network," Rahim replied, gesturing to the symbols on the walls. "These pyramids, on Earth and elsewhere, they're all connected. This is how they're navigated, how the gateways are activated." Amal's breath caught. "You're saying this obelisk controls the dimensional shifts?" Rahim nodded. "Not just controls them. It monitors the balance. This is the heart of the system." Amal felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that they were standing at the epicenter of a multiversal network was staggering. But it also meant they were in incredible danger. If someone was exploiting the system, they would need access to this nexus, or others like it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden change in the room. The symbols on the walls flared brighter, their light pulsing in rapid succession. The hum in the air grew louder, more insistent, and the obelisk began to glow. "What's happening?" Amal demanded, her voice rising in alarm. Rahim's face was pale. "The system is reacting to something, a disruption in the balance." As if to confirm his words, the chamber trembled violently. The obelisk emitted a deep, resonant sound, like a massive bell tolling, and the air around them crackled with energy. The creatures in the room tensed, their glowing eyes flicking toward the obelisk and then to Amal and Rahim. "They're warning us," Amal realized. "Something's wrong." Rahim's fingers danced over the surface of the obelisk, tracing the symbols as if trying to decipher them. "This is bad," he said, his voice tight. "Someone is forcing a dimensional shift from another pyramid." Amal's heart raced. "Can you stop it?" "I can try," Rahim said, his focus unyielding. "But I need time." Another tremor rocked the chamber, nearly knocking Amal off her feet. She gritted her teeth and turned to the creatures. "Can you help him?" she asked, unsure if they could understand her. One of the creatures stepped forward and placed its elongated hand on the obelisk. The shimmering surface rippled at its touch, and the symbols rearranged themselves. Rahim's eyes widened as new patterns emerged, their meaning clicking into place. "This might work," he muttered. "If I can override the incoming shift, I can stabilize the system." Amal watched as Rahim and the creature worked in tandem, their movements synchronized in an eerie, almost otherworldly harmony. But the tremors were growing stronger, and the hum in the air was becoming unbearable. "Rahim, hurry," Amal shouted. "I'm almost there," he replied, his voice strained. Suddenly, a crackling sound filled the chamber, and Amal turned to see a rift forming in the air. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a jagged tear in reality, through which she could glimpse another world. The edges of the rift shimmered and burned, and from within came a deep, guttural roar. Amal's blood ran cold. Something was coming through. "Rahim!" she screamed. "I need more time," Rahim shouted back. But time was a luxury they didn't have. The rift widened, and a massive, shadowy form began to emerge. It was unlike the creatures they had encountered. Its form was chaotic, shifting, and its very presence seemed to distort the air around it. The creatures in the chamber reacted instantly, moving to position themselves between Amal and the emerging threat. Their bodies glowed brighter, their forms solidifying as they prepared to defend the nexus. Amal's mind raced. She had no weapons, no way to fight whatever was coming through the rift. All she had was her determination and her belief that Rahim could stabilize the system. "Rahim, you have to close the rift," she yelled. "I'm trying," Rahim shouted, his hands flying over the obelisk. "But this thing, whatever it is, it's fighting back." The shadowy form roared again, its sound reverberating through the chamber and shaking Amal to her core. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stand her ground. "Whatever you're doing, Rahim, do it faster," she yelled. The obelisk flared with light, its glow becoming blinding. Rahim let out a triumphant cry. "Got it. The override is—" Before he could finish, the rift collapsed with a deafening crack, and the shadowy form was sucked back into the void. The chamber fell silent, the tremor ceasing and the light from the obelisk dimming. Amal collapsed to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The creatures relaxed, their glowing eyes fixed on her and Rahim. Rahim staggered back from the obelisk, his face pale but triumphant. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "We stopped the shift." Amal nodded, her body trembling with exhaustion. "But for how long? And who's behind this?" Rahim's expression darkened. "That's what we need to find out. Whoever's tampering with the pyramids, they're not just endangering our world. They're endangering all of them." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Amal cast one last glance at the obelisk. The shifting pyramid had given them a glimpse of its power and its dangers. Their journey was far from over. If anything, it was only beginning. The desert wind was biting as Amal and Rahim emerged from the shimmering pyramid. The night sky above Giza looked unchanged, but the world felt different. Every grain of sand beneath their feet seemed to carry the weight of the knowledge they had just uncovered. The pyramid behind them now stood silent, its surface as solid and weathered as it had been for millennia. Yet Amal knew that beneath that ancient facade lay a mechanism capable of tearing through the fabric of reality. "We've got to report this," Amal said, breaking the tense silence as they trudged toward their vehicle parked near the excavation site. "To who?" Rahim asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "The academic community won't believe us without evidence, and even if they did, what could they possibly do? This isn't just science, it's something else entirely." Amal stopped, her boots sinking slightly into the sand. She turned to face Rahim, frustration simmering in her voice. "We can't just sit on this, Professor. Someone is manipulating the pyramids, and whatever they're doing could destroy everything. We need allies. We need resources." Rahim sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're right, but we need to be careful about how we approach this. The wrong people knowing about the pyramids could be just as dangerous as whoever's behind these disruptions." Amal nodded reluctantly. She couldn't argue with that. If governments or corporations got wind of the pyramid's true nature, it could spark chaos, wars, exploitation. Or worse, they needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Back at their modest research station on the outskirts of Cairo, Amal and Rahim pored over the data they had managed to collect from the obelisk. The encrypted patterns were incomprehensible at first glance, but Rahim was confident he could decode them with enough time. Amal, meanwhile, began scouring their satellite logs for any anomalous activity near other pyramids around the world. "There," she said, pointing at the screen. "Look at this." Rahim leaned over her shoulder. On the display was a map of Earth, overlaid with energy readings from their satellite scans. The pyramids at Giza were a bright red, pulsating with the energy flux they had just experienced. But elsewhere, similar readings were appearing at Teotihuacan in Mexico, the Great Pyramid of Cholula, and even the step pyramids of Angkor Wat in Cambodia. "It's not just the Giza pyramids," Amal said. "This is a global network. And those other sites, they're active." Rahim's face tightened. Whoever's behind this must be using multiple points in the network to achieve their goal. But why? What could they possibly want? Amal's fingers danced over the keyboard, pulling up historical and mythological records associated with the pyramids. If the pyramids are anchors holding the multiverse together, maybe destabilizing them could give someone control over everything. Or destroy it, Rahim said grimly. The implication sent a chill down Amal's spine. If these portals were tampered with recklessly, they could unleash untold chaos, not just across Earth, but across countless dimensions. As they worked late into the night, an encrypted message arrived on Rahim's secure email, a message from an unknown sender. The subject line was simple: "I know what you found." Amal and Rahim exchanged uneasy glances before opening the email. The body of the message contained a single line of text: "Meet me at the coordinates below. Time is running out." Beneath it was a set of GPS coordinates pointing to a remote location deep in the Sinai Peninsula. "This is a trap," Amal said immediately, her instinct screaming at her. "Probably," Rahim agreed. "But if someone else knows about the pyramids, we can't ignore it." Amal groaned. "Fine, but we don't go unprepared. If we're walking into a trap, we need an exit plan." The journey to the coordinates took hours, their jeep rumbling over rugged desert terrain as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the dunes. Amal couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every distant glint of light, every subtle shift in the landscape felt like a potential threat. When they arrived, they found a lone figure waiting for them at the base of a rocky outcrop. The man was dressed in nondescript desert gear, his face partially obscured by a scarf. He raised a hand in greeting but made no move toward them. "Stay here," Rahim said, stepping out of the vehicle. "Let me talk to him." "Not a chance," Amal said, grabbing her flashlight, which now doubled as a crude weapon. "If you go, I go." They approached the man cautiously, their footsteps crunching against the gravel. As they neared, the man lowered his scarf, revealing a face weathered by years of sun and hardship. His piercing gray eyes locked onto Amal and Rahim. "You're brave to come here," the man said, his voice rough but steady. "Or foolish. Who are you?" Rahim demanded. "And how do you know about the pyramids?" The man smirked. "You can call me Elias. Let's just say I've been following the anomalies for a long time. Longer than you might believe." Amal crossed her arms. "If you've been following them, why haven't you done anything about it?" Elias's expression darkened. "Because the people behind this aren't just ordinary scientists or opportunists. They're an ancient order, one that's been waiting centuries to harness the pyramid's true power. And now they're close." "What power?" Rahim asked, his curiosity piqued. Elias hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Control over the multiverse. Imagine being able to rewrite reality itself. That's what they're after. And if they succeed, nothing will be the same." Amal felt her stomach drop. "How do we stop them?" Elias reached into his pack and pulled out a small, glowing artifact, a fragment of crystal that seemed to pulse in time with Amal's heartbeat. "This," he said, holding it up. "It's a fragment of an ancient key designed to lock the pyramid's network and stabilize the balance. Without it, the network is vulnerable." Rahim frowned. "Why do you have it?" "Because I stole it from them," Elias said simply. "But it's only one piece. The others are scattered across the globe, hidden in the other pyramids. If we don't find them all, we won't stand a chance." Amal exchanged a glance with Rahim. Their discovery had just spiraled into something far bigger than they could have imagined. They weren't just uncovering secrets anymore. They were now part of a race to save the multiverse itself. "Then we'd better start looking," Amal said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Elias nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Good, because the clock is ticking." Elias wasted no time leading Amal and Rahim back to their vehicle. The artifact in his hand glowed faintly, its pulse quickening as they neared the coordinates of their next destination. Amal couldn't take her eyes off it, her scientific mind desperate to understand how something so small could influence the balance of the multiverse. "The next fragment is in Teotihuacan," Elias said as they drove through the barren desert. "The Pyramid of the Sun. It's already destabilizing. There's no telling how long it'll hold before it triggers a chain reaction." "How do you know where these fragments are?" Rahim asked, his curiosity winning over his wariness. Elias's expression was grim. Because I used to work for them, the Order of Ankh. I was part of their inner circle until I realized what their true intentions were. They want to collapse the balance, erase the rules of the multiverse, and rebuild it in their image. I couldn't be part of that. Amal clenched her fists. And now you're trying to undo the damage you helped cause? Elias nodded. Something like that. But I can't do it alone. That's where you two come in. The journey to Mexico was a blur. Every moment felt like a countdown to disaster, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on all of them. When they arrived at Teotihuacan, the scene was chaos. The Pyramid of the Sun loomed ahead, its majestic form flickering as if caught between two realities. The air was heavy with static, and cracks of blue energy arced across the stone. Too late for subtlety, Elias muttered, grabbing his pack. We need to get to the top and find the fragment. The trio ran toward the pyramid, weaving through tourists and archaeologists who were scrambling to evacuate. As they climbed the ancient steps, Amal felt the air grow thicker, each step a struggle as the pyramid's shifting energy pushed against her. At the summit, the source of the disturbance became clear. The second fragment hovered in midair, glowing with an intense light that distorted the space around it. The stone platform beneath it was cracking, chunks of reality itself peeling away and revealing glimpses of a void beyond. We need to stabilize it, Rahim shouted, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. Elias nodded and pulled the first fragment from his pack. This will act as a stabilizer, but you'll need to align them. Amal, you're the scientist. You'll have to figure it out. Amal's stomach dropped, but she didn't hesitate. She ran to the hovering fragment, feeling the energy prickling her skin like static electricity. She studied the two fragments, their glowing edges flickering as if trying to repel each other. Amal, Rahim called out. The symbols. They match the ones from the obelisk. Use what we learned. Amal's mind raced, recalling the patterns they had seen in the control nexus. She reached for the glowing fragment, her hands trembling as the energy coursed through her. Slowly, she began rotating the fragment, aligning its glowing edges with the first piece in Elias's hand. The pyramid groaned beneath them, the cracks widening as the energy surged. Amal gritted her teeth, sweat pouring down her face as she forced the fragments into alignment. Just as the pieces clicked together, a shockwave of light erupted from the pyramid, washing over the landscape. For a moment, everything was silent. The pyramid's flickering stabilized, its form solidifying as the cracks in reality healed. The air became still, and the oppressive energy dissipated. Amal collapsed to her knees, the combined artifact clutched tightly in her hands. Elias and Rahim rushed to her side, their faces etched with relief. You did it, Elias said, helping her to her feet. You stabilized the pyramid. But it's not over, Amal said, her voice hoarse. How many more fragments are there? Elias hesitated before answering. One more. In Cambodia, at Angkor, what? If we retrieve it, we can complete the key and lock the network for good. Their final destination took them to the lush jungles of Cambodia, where Angkor Wat's ancient spires rose like sentinels above the dense foliage. By now, the Order of Ankh was aware of their actions, and the trio knew they would face resistance. As they approached the central temple, they encountered the Order's agents, cloaked figures wielding advanced weaponry that crackled with energy. Amal's heart pounded as she and Rahim took cover behind the ruins, Elias firing a compact energy weapon he had hidden in his pack. This was never going to be easy, Elias said, gritting his teeth. We need to move fast. Amal, you and Rahim head for the central chamber. I'll hold them off. No way. Amal protested. We're not splitting up. You're the only one who can align the fragments, Elias snapped. Go. I'll meet you inside. Reluctantly, Amal and Rahim sprinted toward the central chamber, dodging blasts of energy as the Order's agents pursued them. When they reached the heart of the temple, they found the final fragment suspended in a glowing orb of light, surrounded by symbols that pulsed with dangerous energy. We need to move quickly, Rahim said, his voice tight. The pyramid's already destabilizing. Amal worked feverishly, aligning the two fragments they had with the third. As she did, the ground shook violently, and the walls of the temple began to crack. The air was thick with tension, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, with a loud click, the fragments locked into place, forming a complete key. The glowing orb of light surrounding the third fragment dissolved, and the temple's tremor ceased. The key in Amal's hands pulsed with a steady, harmonious rhythm. Elias stumbled into the chamber, blood seeping from a wound on his arm. "Did you do it?" Amal held up the key. "It's done." Elias grinned through the pain. "Then let's finish this." Back at the Giza Pyramid, the trio stood before the control nexus once more. Amal placed the completed key on the obelisk, the crystalline surface rippling as it absorbed the artifact. Symbols lit up across the walls, and a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. "The network is stabilizing," Rahim said, his voice filled with awe. "We did it." As the pyramid's glow faded, the air around them became still. The danger had passed, and the multiverse was safe, at least for now. Elias turned to Amal and Rahim, his expression unreadable. "You've done something incredible today, but the Order won't stop. They'll regroup, and when they do, the pyramids will need guardians." Amal nodded, her resolve firm. "Then we'll be ready." As they stepped out of the pyramid and into the dawn light, Amal felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. The pyramids, once thought to be relics of the past, were now the key to the future, and she was determined to protect them no matter the cost. As they stepped out of the pyramid and into the dawn light, Amal felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. The pyramids, once thought to be relics of the past, were now the key to the future, and she was determined to protect them no matter the cost.